Christmas. Great time of year. I love this, man. I love these graphics by Brendan. This really looks awesome. Hey, got a packed show today. We're going to have Coach Ellis Johnson on with us here. Joining us, Jason Caldwell, Auburn Undercover, Ken Capps, Football Writers Association of America. He's got a cool story about Cade Klubnik from Austin Westlake. His high school game against Quinn Ewers, legendary, two big-time five-star quarterbacks on the field going head-to-head. We'll talk about Texas, Clemson, Georgia, Tennessee. We're going to cover all 16 of the SEC teams. We like to say this. We cover college football, basketball, baseball in the South like kudzu and cotton. So that means we cover it everywhere, all right? So,
everywhere.
Yeah. Look, take a picture of the QR code on the screen and subscribe to Sidelines. Of course, you know, we're live on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, 7 channels, live streaming. If you miss us live, always remember, you can always go back and catch us later, okay? So, Coach Johnson, we'll get started here, go over to South Carolina. And, Coach, playoffs are going to start this weekend. This is history. It's a big deal. We had the Army-Navy game Saturday. Navy won. That was a good. Now, I put something out there that it's so good to see these guys that love their country, love their school. Someone said right after the game, Army's running back entered the transfer portal. Now, I don't know if that's serious or not, but, you know, college football, man, we watch a lot of it, and we love the game, but the portal's underway right now. And as a coach, you got to be saying if your second, third, fourth team quarterbacks are all leaving and they've been there for less than a year, how are you going to build anywhere a culture, a championship culture?
Well, I do think it has made a difference, and we talked about it earlier in a couple of shows that teams can no longer stack depth, these power teams, and it's starting to affect how good they can play throughout the season when they get a couple of nagging injuries or they have to rotate. Just a lot of things about depth charts. The one particular thing you mentioned about the service academies, if you start the third year, the very first day of your third year, you're locked in to your contract with the military. So you could leave West Point or Naval Academy or Air Force. You could leave before your junior year, and you would not necessarily have an obligation to go into service. And it's a tough thing because they do lose some kids at that time. The portal probably has put a little gas on that. I don't know. I think I think of South Carolina's situation, just had a defensive end that they got out of the portal last year from Georgia Tech. He wins a national award, and a week later he decides he's not going to play in the bowl game. So it's just a different time. It would be harder for me to handle. I love the NIL, but I don't like the portal.
Yeah, I mean, giving people in the business world and these guys, they want to be treated like adults and professionals. You have contracts, and we've all had contracts. Brendan, you, me, everybody probably watching the show has. You walk out before that contract is up, then you're on the hook. You got to pay it back. And why the NCAA has acquiesced and capitulated to every demand is it's obvious. They're weak, they're spineless, and they have no leadership. And they're letting the tail wag the dog. All right, let's talk about these matchups. I think this weekend it's going to be fun to watch Clemson and Texas. And Ken Capps will be on here later. But let's talk about that matchup. What makes you think Texas wins or Clemson wins Saturday in Austin?
Well, I think if you look at the overall roster, Texas is just so much more talented, so much more deep. The one thing I do think, Klubnik has been healthy all year and has played extremely well. I'm not sure he has the surrounding cast that Ewers does, but he's healthier and he's probably had a better year. One thing, if you mentioned a while ago that Ken wrote a story, I don't know what his angle was, But, those two kids played each other in the state championship game. And Dabo was talking the other night. He and Slark actually went to the game together. And it's the only time Dabo's ever been to DKR was to watch those two kids play in that game.
Oh, wow.
So it's a lot of really unique things coming along with that matchup. But it's going to be a tall order. If Clemson's running back, Maffa, if he's not healthy, they've got to get him healthy. He's basically the only running game they have. The system is not a system that has a real physical running game to it, scheme-wise. And just him being a 225, 230-pound back has been critical to their running game. That running game has been absent the last 3 weeks. And it almost lost them the SMU game. They could have iced the game 3 different times in the fourth quarter last game. And it did lose the South Carolina game because they couldn't stay on the field a little bit in the fourth quarter and the defense got tired. So that's the biggest thing for Clemson. They got to get him healthy and have all their weapons there just to make it a ball game, I think.
Yeah, and you talked about not being able to run the ball. You're seeing this in the NFL, like the Philadelphia Eagles. That stat, who's the leading rusher in the NFL, Saquon Barkley in the second half. And you really don't hear that much about great rushing attacks in the NFL. Now in college, you look at Texas, their defensive front versus Clemson's. Without even Bo Davis is gone. He's gone to LSU. He's a hell of a coach. They're still really stout. They've been 1 or 2 in the country all year in defense. How are you going to attack Texas if you're Clemson to try to do it? I mean, through the air. All year long, Georgia's the only team that dominated Texas in Austin, and the game in Atlanta was back and forth. But that game, and that was done, Georgia, without having any superstars out on the edge. There's no Brock Bowers, no Ladd McConkey, no one like that.
No, it's going to be a tall order. But I will say the style of passing game that Clemson runs, it lends itself pretty well to a great pass rush defense. If you're playing against them, it lends itself pretty well to not being affected too much because most of that ball's out so quickly by design that the edge rushers really don't become a factor. Now, if they end up getting in a lot of predictable pass situations where they have to throw the ball downfield a little bit more in third down, then they're going to be in trouble. But South Carolina's got as good a pass rush as anybody in the SEC, and they basically, their defensive ends were, you didn't see them that game. They didn't really produce anything. They got 1 sack the whole game, and it was an interior guy, one of their tackles it was a linebacker on an inside stunt. But they got no pressure off the edge on Clemson, and I'll put their pass rush against anybody's in the conference. But they've got to be able to run the football some. What people do, sometimes they'll look at the statistics at the end of the game and they'll say, well, they ran for 110 or they ran for 140. Well, they did that when they were mixing along in the first, second quarter. When you get in a ball game on 3rd and 1, or you go for a 4th and short at a critical time, or you get late in the game where you need to shorten that game and you've got that lead and you want to get off the field and you need to be able to run it and you can't run it. That's a problem. And that's what Clemson's problem has been ever since Maffa has not been healthy these last few weeks. He's got a shoulder that's tender. He's not running like a big back, and it's hurt him a lot. And that's the biggest problem with that.
Well, all right, let's head up to the shoe up in Columbus. Tennessee, I think Tennessee, I'm picking them to win this game. Ohio State banged up a lot on the line of scrimmage. Matt Dean talked about that. It was up there for the Oregon Penn State Big Ten Championship, and his son's on that staff at Oregon. They know Ohio State very well. What are the chances Tennessee goes up in your mind and fulfills my prophecy of a 24-14 win Saturday night? And who cares what the weather is? Those players are going to be ready to go regardless. They'll probably love snow.
Yeah, unless the field conditions are so bad that it affects, things like ball handling. I don't think the temperature, I think that's being overrated.
Exactly.
A lot of these kids on both teams play in northern schools or whatever. So I don't know how it's a touchdown spread. I really think it's a closer spread than that. I do give Ohio State a little bit of edge. I've got concerns about Iamaleava and him being able to play in a big game and play well. Hadn't done it this year. He's not been terrible, but when it's been a big game, such as when they went to Georgia, it's just not, the production's not quite there. Now, the defense has been really good all year, but it didn't travel to Georgia real well either. They'd had a little bit of a drop off. But I think the key is going to be Tennessee's defensive front, how well they can stop the running game and pressure that quarterback. If they get some turnovers off of Ohio State, I think you're right. I think they got a shot to win that ball game. But they're really going to have to get some turnovers, I think, and create some possessions for their offense more than just allowing the back and forth part of it. I'd give Ohio State an edge if it's a turnover-free ball game.
Yeah, and you look at Nico Iamaleava, I think he's averaging about 207 yards passing a game. But you said it early this season. Tennessee's offense depends on completing deep balls, at least 5 or 6 of them during the game, because it pushes everybody back. And their running game with Dylan Sampson, he's been the leading rusher in the SEC from the start of the season. I like their running game, but if you get behind on the road and you got to pass your way out of it, I don't like their chances then. That flips my narrative. I'm just thinking defensive front, and they can't have a repeat of the Georgia game. They get up 10-0, and it's tied 17 at the half. And in the second half, Kirby adjusted. And I think that's where he's at his best, is at halftime adjustments. Whereas, Pruitt, he was really good at adjusting in real time. Jeremy Pruitt. And I look at you as a defensive coordinator, all these guys, Brother Oliver, Ken Donahue. There's a lot of real time. It's a game of chess, isn't it?
Oh, it is. Person that taught me to adjust on the fly was Steve Spurrier. If you waited till you got to the locker room to make an adjustment, you might be making an adjustment from 20 behind. If you did something good, you better make sure you don't go back to it too often. He'll have an answer. And if there's something he finds that's a weakness, you better get it straightened out quick, because he's not going to wait till halftime to come back to it. But that'll be a big key. But I just really think it's going to be a good football game. I do think if they get in, a knockdown, drag out boxing match, I give Ohio State a little bit of an edge. But Tennessee's offense is built like you said. The vertical passing game opens up the running game. Everything comes off of that.
Yeah.
As average as they've been with the passing game this year, their running game has been really solid. And they've been able to run the football when they really need to, not necessarily being able to hit those downfield passes like they like to do.
All right. You think about Ohio State. And what is it? I mean, you're right. A lot of those players at Ohio State are from the South. Urban Meyer really started pushing Ohio State into Texas. But again, I go back to the weather. I've lost track of the number of times when SEC schools and their fans will say, yeah, we're going to get them down here in September. They're going to wilt under the heat. And by God, a cold front comes through. It's 67 degrees. If you try to base what you think is going to happen on a game on other factors like the weather and the wind, is that you're going to get in trouble every time. And I like what you said about Steve Spurrier adjusting in real time. I've noticed different coaches do it different ways, but that is going to be a hell of a matchup. And what you just said is, if Tennessee, it's Iamaleava. He's really good, but he's yet to have a breakout game, at least on the road, against a quality opponent. So that's a concern. We're going to have the next one is Penn State and SMU. I look at James Franklin's record, 1-14 against top 5 teams. And I don't know how much you can read into that other than he hadn't won those games, but it's not like Penn State's not a good program. I think they're 11-2. And then there's SMU. I'm a big Rhett Lashley fan. Followed him. I worked with one of his teammates, David Thompson in Memphis. Played with Gus from 8th grade as his quarterback. was at Auburn a long time as a GA. At SMU in 3 years, he's won 30 games, Coach. It's not like they don't have money out there. They got players. But my first impression watching them against Clemson was, man, they're small compared to Clemson. Where are they going to need to have a breakout game that you hadn't seen all year to beat Penn State? And they're going to want a whiteout. James Franklin saying, y'all don't wear your camo. Don't come from the deer stand to the game. It's a whiteout. Hopefully they're going to have snow. But let's talk about the Nittany Lions and the Ponies.
Yeah, this is a unique matchup, I guess. I don't think SMU has the physicality in the box to play with them for 60 minutes.
Yeah.
But I will say this: they've held up in the running game. Their defensive front, it's been respectable. And certainly Clemson didn't run it on them, not when they needed to. They got stuffed a couple of times. But where I think they've got an issue, their offense is a very balanced offense. It's a good offense, but it's also predicated on the ability of the quarterback to run and pass. And it's more of a skill offense. They're not strong up front on offensive line. And Penn State, I think that's their strength. Yeah. So it'll be an interesting matchup. I think if they could somehow jump out with some points early and make Penn State play a little different style of football game, they'd have a shot to beat them. But I think this is a really, really hard matchup for SMU.
I do too. And I just think Penn State, they're good. I mean, I've seen them play a few times in person. They're fast. They're strong. And I'm talking about not this year, but just in previous years. I don't see – and I want Rhett Lashley. I want him to get the win. I'm a big fan of his. But I don't like the matchup. But what's most important is the matchups on game day, isn't it, Coach? I mean, we're looking at it right now. Somebody gets hurt, goes out in the first quarter, and people say that, and I want your opinion on this. The guy, he's not a good practice player, but he's a great game player. And I'll qualify it even more. If you're a second or third team guy and barring injury, you're not going in, maybe so, but you still got to be ready, because I remember Patrick Nix coming in when Stan White got hurt in that 93 Iron Bowl, and it was like deer in the headlights, and Patrick was prepared for the moment, ready for the task. Talk about that and just the overall, what I just said.
Yeah, well, I had a coach in college. In fact, he was Charlie Rizzo. Charlie played center for Auburn when Pat Sullivan was quarterback. And I know a lot of Auburn fans would maybe remember. A lot of them probably wouldn't. But
Mac and Gene Lorindo coached him, yeah.
But he was my linebacker coach. And I think one of the parents of one of our players called in one time and told Coach Ross that, you really need to play Johnny a little more. He said, well, he hadn't been really making the progress in practice that we feel like he's ready. And he said, Coach, I'm just going to tell you now, he's one of those guys, when the lights come on, he's a gamer.
Yeah.
Coach said, well, if we don't ever see it on the practice field, he's never going to be able to see the lights. But you do make a good point. There are some guys that they're kind of pedestrian in practice, and they get it done. They're good, but all of a sudden they get the game, and something just flips. They know how to do things and how to win. But I think it's hard to say. I don't know. I just don't see the matchup being something they can overcome.
Yeah, and
Coach, you there? Yeah, I think Rob froze on us. He's got the special internet that just gets him on the best look. So we'll see if Rob jumps back in with us. But go ahead with what you're saying there, Coach, and I'll see if I can't get Rob dialed back in. But what do you see the final outcome coming? For the game you guys were talking about.
Well, I just think I think Penn State is just too powerful and too physical.
Do you?
Unless they turn the ball over or, shoot themselves in the foot, I really think they're too strong for SMU.
Yeah, well, I think you discussed it earlier. SMU kind of I think this is a great year for them all the way around. I think that they're good to be back in the conversation, but I think I agree with you on that. I watched you're the one that got me on Penn State early on and says they're better than what people have said they were, even though they got knocked for strength of schedule.
Yeah, Brendan, the one thing, and I haven't been able to watch them a whole lot, but the one thing I never saw the whole time I followed them is the big play guy. Was it the quarterback that had a breakout game, or a running back, or a skill guy on offense? They usually, just physically played extremely well, turnovers, took care of the football, field position, and all that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when you get in these championship brackets, at some point in time, you got to have somebody make an explosive play. And they may have them, but I didn't see a lot of that this year. So that would be the only thing in the back of my mind that would give SMU a chance.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've had a lot of people gambling on Penn State this year were saying that I think Brad Bellamy from Landers Ford was talking about it was breaking his heart all year. So, but yeah, it's a fun matchup. When you're talking about conference championship, Coach, you've been there, you've been a part of these things. Are we passe now? Is this sort of like, do we need to be doing these things with the college playoff and the expansion hopefully into the next year, into 12 from 12 to 16 maybe? Who knows what they're going to do? What do you see the future being there?
Well, I don't think the conference championship games will become a casualty of it because they're making money off of them and getting too much exposure. I do think they're creating some headaches, if you will, going into the playoff bracket. And eventually the playoff bracket will be most important. And if something's making the playoff bracket less fair, less equitable, less interesting, or less whatever, it's going to be moved out of the way. It's going to be changed. So I don't see championship games disappearing. What I do see is the possibility they're going to have to cut out these conference automatic buys.
Yeah.
I was never a fan for expansion. I never was even a fan for the playoff. But that's where we are now. And I think to have a reasonable playoff with over 130-something teams in a league, I think you need 16 teams, cut out the buys. Everybody plays the same number of games if they get a shot to go all the way.
Right.
Especially, we cannot give these group of 5 conferences an automatic entry and an automatic bye. I think an automatic entry is fair. I think they win the conference, they should get in. But to give them an automatic bye or seed them up really high, that's just ridiculous. And there's some really good teams in those conferences. And I'm not saying they're not, but year in and year out, you're going to get teams from those conferences that are not capable of playing championship football with these other teams in these brackets. They're just not going to be able to.
Yeah. Well, and then what do you do though with, a team like Notre Dame, obviously no conference, it's just like so to me, I always bring up Notre Dame because they're always, in the top 25 or you're rustling around there somewhere. If conference championship's going to have weight if these guys don't play, you know what I mean? And it harkens back to what you're saying. You can't just be an auto bid in if you're going to play in a conference championship if you win your conference. That's saying the SEC is just better than everybody else and you're going to be in no matter what. That's not fair is what you're saying, and certainly not any sort of buy for winning or being in that position is sort of not fair. It just, then where do the bowl games shake out, right? Do we just eliminate those kinds of things? Do they become like NIT, like as far as like college basketball, or what, or you keep those around just for the for the fans?
Well, I think they've done a good job incorporating the bowls. I think that having them involved in the playoffs as locations on that second round, and there may be a way you could do it on the first round if they go to 16 teams. This damn on campus is a big advantage, just like a bye is a big advantage. The teams that don't get to play on their own campus or get a bye, I mean, you won't see any of them win the whole thing. They'll never make that track. But I think you need to keep the bowls involved, and I think they know how to put on postseason games because they've been doing it for 100 years, and they need to be involved in the brackets. And I do think the conference champions should get an automatic entry. but they've got to cut out the automatic buys. That's got to be seeded at the end. And of course, seeding's not perfect. If you look at the polls, when they did the top 25 at the beginning of the year, there are now 13 teams in the top 25 at the beginning of the year, and they're not in the top 25 anymore. So the gurus and the pundits don't get it right all the time, but I don't know any other way you do it. That's the way they do it in basketball. That's the way they do it in baseball. You got to seed it if you don't have a legitimate league bracket championship like the NFL. So I think that's the only answer. But I don't want to see the championship games suffer. I think they're too important. But I don't think that, I don't think that anything that is hurting or impeding the playoff, I don't think anything is safe if it's hurting the championship playoff, because it's starting to get too much power, too much money, and too much, too much momentum behind it. And that's what people want.
Coach, I mean, the championship playoff is so big, it's swallowing up all the oxygen in the room. Can anybody tell me who won the Heisman Trophy?
What's that?
Yeah, I mean, can y'all believe this? It's that big. Talking about this Indiana Notre Dame game, Curt Cignetti's a hell of a coach. To go 11-1 at Indiana, I mean, in their history, they've never done it before. Comes in out of James Madison, year one. I tell you, and Indiana's got some wealthy boosters. And I know one person that works for a Hoosier guy that has already given them 7 figures, and he was a walk-on there, and is seriously considering giving more. What, Coach? You can take a coach like you, and you'll win anywhere you go. Curt Cignetti, what do you know about him? We know Marcus Freeman played at Ohio State. I mean, I know his agent here in Memphis. He's in Nashville now. But, damn, I think this is a hell of a matchup. I think it's underrated. I don't think Indiana's going to get beaten like a drum like a lot of people are predicting.
No, I don't think so either. I do think they've got a physicality question mark.
Yeah.
And I think Ohio State exposed it. But they couldn't put them away and just embarrass them because they are so well coached and they execute.
Yeah.
And all that. Now, Notre Dame's quarterback, he's a winner. He's a good kid, came from Duke, but I don't think he is championship caliber level talent.
Yeah.
And that may be the one place that they can hang with Notre Dame. But I do think overall, the talent level, the physicality, the difference in the box, and some of those things, Notre Dame's defense is exceptionally good. I think it's a tall order for Indiana, and I think they'll have a hard time. I don't want to get off on a tangent, but I think Notre Dame needs to either get in a conference or people need to quit playing them. Every time you do something in college football, there's this rule, that rule, this rule, that rule, and then you got to have the Notre Dame rules.
Exactly.
And at some point in time, that's fine. Back when Army and Navy were independent and Notre Dame was independent.
BYU.
Hell, Penn State, Pittsburgh, all the Big East teams were independent. There was a faction there. But now everybody's in a conference and everybody's going to be in the playoff and everybody's going to do this and everybody except not Notre Dame. I've had enough of it.
Me too.
And I don't know how they couldn't get into playoffs with the rules. So that's enough of that. But I do think they're one of the better teams, but I think they've got a little limitation at quarterback. And I think that would be their Achilles heel.
Yeah. I want to go back to a comment by Bob Poole on the show here. Brendan, he's talking about strength of schedule, and the Big Ten, half the Big Ten teams don't have winning records, yet they're telling us that 3 of the top 6 teams are Big Ten teams. That part right there, address that. And then as far as the Notre Dame thing goes, when they did their contract in 83 or 84 with NBC, I think it was 5 years at $50 million. So it was $10 million a year. They've got to be in a back then we had, if I'm not mistaken, we had 19 teams back then that were independent. Fast forward 40 years, we have one, and that's Notre Dame. So anyway, but talk about that strength of schedule in the Big Ten, if you would.
Yeah, I think it's a legit comment, but I don't think it's totally weak conference. There are teams like Michigan had a very average to poor year this year, but you just don't go play Michigan and play badly and win. And Ohio State found out that last ball game. Teams like Michigan, Iowa, Southern Cal. I mean, these teams were not even ranked this year at the end of the season, but you play them on a given Saturday, you had to come to play. And of course, the SEC, we like to talk about our Vanderbilts and our Kentuckys and our teams of that nature, South Carolinas, and some of them that are not normally nationally competitive. On a given year, they are. But when you play them on a Saturday, if you're not prepared to play, you will get beat. So I think there's more teams in the Big Ten than maybe they're saying were quality teams this year. But top to bottom, it does have its weaknesses, down through the schedule. And Indiana caught it right this year, but that's not their fault. They played everybody they played, and they beat them. And except for Ohio State, and it wasn't a real great game, but it wasn't a blowout either.
Yeah, you're right. And it's always going to be debatable. I want to bring in Jason Caldwell from Auburn Undercover. And Jason, just looking at these schedules and all, Jason, I got the news last night about Chet Williams, what happened at Lake Martin. And Coach, you remember Chet Williams when you were at Auburn. That's horrible. I remember when I was at Auburn, Chet was a walk-on. And I remember I used to have to go get practice notes for David Housel off the practice field. So I would see Chet. He was a walk-on, and he did. He went through hey, either you do it my way or hit the road. I remember talking to him, and I watched him just grow, and he has been the glue at Auburn for so long. And worst possible news. And I don't know, Jason, he helped to build a culture, and that's a horrible loss. And I will, let you talk about it, but it's just a really sad day. And I know there's so many people whose lives he impacted. You'd have to do 3 days worth of shows to put that out.
Yeah. Huge impact on the program, and not just the program itself, but on men and growing. And you see the guys that have responded now, still talking about him to this day and how much he meant to them. And so, it's, unexpected news and sad news, but a guy that, devoted his life and those ministries into pouring into guys and their families. I wrote just a little something. So it's hard to kind of put into words right now, because it's still so sudden. But a guy that, I just talked to 2 days ago, and talked to him 10 or 15 minutes. And we were talking about how, both of us, I think it would have been year number 26 next year for us. And for him to tragically lose his life like that is just really sad.
Yeah. I was just out at Lake Martin a couple of weeks ago. Just think about that all the time. Coach Ellis Johnson's on here with us right now, and we've been talking some playoffs and all the stuff going on. Jason, let's get the latest from you, covering football, basketball, baseball. I think baseball is your favorite sport. You're a hell of an announcer when you're on the Auburn Baseball Network. You and Cameron, I think, loves baseball more than anybody that I know, but you're right up there with him. But let's talk about big news for Auburn over the weekend in the portal and the significance of bringing in those guys, and where you think they'll play right away, or what that means to the depth chart.
Yeah, no, you bringing guys in from the portal. Those guys better be coming in to make an impact. That's what you're doing that for. So you look at, obviously quarterback and Jackson Arnold, and with the news that Jackson Arnold comes in, I think an hour or so later, we find out that Walker White says he's going to leave, and so that's just the nature of things now. And that's honestly, you look at it, and I think about it from a baseball perspective, because I talked to some baseball coaches the other day, but it's the same in football and some other sports. If you're not playing as a true freshman, and you're a coach, and you go, okay, I've got a guy that I don't know who, other than some practice time, I don't know what he's about, or I can go get a guy that has proven it at this level. It's hard not to go get a guy that's proven at this level. That's just the way it is. So it's hard to to think about playing for the future too, because everything is so immediate. There's not, hey, let's 5 years from now, we're going to be really good. Well, if that's what you're depending on, then 5 years from now, somebody else is going to be pretty good if they can keep those players around. And so, but yeah, Jackson Arnold's a quarterback, I think athletic guy that fits what they want to do from a scheme standpoint. Was really in a tough situation this year at Oklahoma when you lose 5 wide receivers and you're playing with an offensive line that was not very good. I think they gave up 46 sacks, and that's a team that they didn't throw it a ton either. To give up 46 sacks was pretty wild. And so I think that's a big one. And Xavier Chaplin, offensive tackle from Virginia Tech. Those are the 2 spots from an Auburn perspective that you look at and go, what's 1A and 1B? That's probably it. You still got interior defensive line that needs some older, experienced guys and linebacker as well. But I think you look, and those are the 2 things that you absolutely had to go get, right away to start building towards next year.
Yeah. Coach, jump in here with Jason Caldwell, AU Undercover.
Ellis, you good?
How you doing?
I'm good.
And guys, I apologize. I hadn't heard that news about Chet. He was our chaplain when I was coaching.
Yeah.
And just a great guy. But,
just happened last night about, I think, 5, 6 o'clock, just about dark at Kalijah. From what I understand, was going to get off a boat or to get back on the boat, and they were going to eat dinner, and the restaurant was closed, and so I think fell and apparently either hit his head or did something, and whoever was with him could not immediately find him, and so but just an unbelievably sad situation.
I hate that. Well, one quick happy on the Plains. I was there Saturday for my daughter's graduation, so I drove down Friday. We had graduation Saturday morning and drove back. But didn't get to see a lot of football this week, but I did have a good trip to the Plains.
Congratulations. That's a big deal.
Big day. And, it was wild. I covered the basketball game in Atlanta. And so Janai Broome, they beat Ohio State, and he drove back. They drove back to Auburn and graduated. Him and Ellis Johnson later that day. So they had a big basketball win and then played, then had graduation later the same day.
Yeah, and hopefully Coach will be back in here, but 91-53 win over Ohio State in Atlanta. And remember, Auburn played Memphis there a few years ago and lost that game.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we got you. But this basketball team, 9 or 10 seniors on it, and Coach, we've been talking about how hard it is to build a culture.
Can y'all pick me up?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah.
You're good. And nine seniors, or maybe 10. You build a culture like that, Jason. Man, that shows you, if guys stick around, how they've gotten the buy-in with Bruce Pearl is nothing short of amazing.
Yeah, and you look at it, and I think the only 3 guys that started their careers here are Dylan Caldwell and then the 2 freshmen. I think that's it. So it's a group of transfer guys, but multi-year transfers. I think that's one of the keys is having guys on campus for multiple years. It's hard in 1 year's time to go, hey, just flip it and here's guys for 1 year. It's no matter what sport it is, it's hard to do that because of everything that goes into a program.
Yeah.
Now you can plug and play a few guys, but if you're trying to turn over a roster every year, it becomes really difficult because of the camaraderie and everything that are needed to be successful.
Yeah. Jason, Josh Aldridge is going to take the job as defensive coordinator at East Carolina. Any names you're hearing about his replacement, who they might be, or will they promote internally?
Yeah, I think they'll probably go from outside. I think, but you'll never know. Normally you start looking for connections when you start talking about assistant coaching hires. You normally look for connections either from the head coaching spot or from the coordinator spot. So you start to look at some guys that maybe that DJ Durkin has worked with in the past. So we'll start to kind of look into that. It's hard. You think that, when you're trying to recruit, now you have to go, fill a coaching vacancy at the same time, portal stuff. You're trying to get it all done. I honestly don't know how these playoff teams are dealing with this. I mean, Penn State lost the backup quarterback getting ready for a playoff game. I don't know how you can do all these things. And, like the calendar, we're going to move up signing days so you can have more time for portal and you're not trying to do both. I don't know that it's made much difference. Now it's a never ending calendar for coaches, and it's pretty wild. And yeah, I think from a coaching standpoint, you're looking at, a Kyle Pope maybe as a guy that to watch for. He's a Georgia Tech hometown kid from Sylacauga that played at Memphis, has been at Memphis. That potentially could be a guy that they make a run at as another one of those defensive line coaches. So.
Coach, being a defensive coordinator, going from being a linebacker coach to defensive coordinator, kind of talk about that quantum jump right there.
Well, the biggest thing about being a coordinator, in my opinion, was just the game flow, the game management. As a coordinator, if you're sitting in a room with a good staff of coaches, you're basically the guy who's putting everything together and putting the plan together or having great ideas and all that's really overrated. But when you're in the middle of a game, you mentioned a while ago making adjustments. The calls, it's not always what you run, it's when you run it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think the older I got, the one thing I got better at was not taking too much into a game.
Yeah.
The players can only do what you've repped, and they know what they're doing mentally and physically. And so you come up with a lot of these great ideas on Thursday. That's a bad formula. You need to get the stuff in, practice it, and call it in the game. And again, it's not what you call, it's when you call it. Football in college, to me, over the years, as it spread out more and it got a little more pace, to me, it's sort of like boxing. It's punch, counter, punch, counter, punch. I think 30, 40 years ago, when 75% of the game was played in between the tackles, it was more about fundamentals and schemes and all this kind of stuff. But it's hard to get that experience without getting that experience. It's like learning how to swim. There's only one way, and that's to get in the water and swim. And somebody can tell you all the strokes and all this kind of stuff, and but it's just something to it. And I do think it's a knack. Yeah, and I really feel like I learned a lot about that from Bill Oliver, working under him at Alabama.
Yeah, I bet. I bet. Jason, a few more minutes before you go. Talk about this recruiting class. Ended up, I think, Auburn about number 6. And most of these guys are coming in January. Address that, and I got one more after that for you.
Yeah, I think all but 4 guys are expected to be in January, which is
that's
the big difference now. Because of portal and the graduation, all that stuff. If you don't have most of those guys coming in, it's hard to practice in the spring. You got to have enough of those guys, and because of that, these guys are now more prepared than ever when they get ready to play as true freshmen, because they get more reps in the spring than teams used to in the past. It's just because they're on campus, and so I think that's a big deal. Saw it this past year with those guys on defense. Normally, it's for a safety, it would be really, really difficult for a guy to come in and play as much as Caleb Harris did as a true freshman. But a guy that came from a program, developed, advanced guy, and then had the spring, it opened the door for that. And so I think you look this year and you go, you got a couple more of those guys that are going to, I think, have an impact right away for Auburn at safety. Anquan Fagans and Eric Winters. I think both those guys are going to play. I mean, I think Charles Kelly would tell you that they're as close to being ready like Caleb Harris was last year. Now they got to go prove it. But if you look at those guys, and the guys up front on defense, normally in the past you'd go quarterback, O-line, and interior defensive line were probably as difficult to place as a true freshman could play because of the physical nature it took on the offensive line and defensive line. And we saw Malik Blockton last year play. And really was probably their best interior defensive lineman, even as a true freshman. I think they got 3 or 4 guys in this class that absolutely are going to play because of the need and because of just physical. Malik Autry's 6'5", 330, can move. Jordan Crawford, we saw him dominate last week in the state championship game. Antonio Coleman, really good player. You look and they've got guys that are physically capable. Now they'll be on campus and get a chance to go. And so look at those guys and look at Deuce Knight. I mean, as it stands now, you only got 2 scholarship quarterbacks. Now I think they'll go get a third, but he's going to get a ton of reps, and he's going to get a chance to develop as much as any freshman quarterback that I can remember in spring practices. So it's going to be a big deal for these guys coming in early.
Yeah. Jason, one more. Is there any player or the other players you're concerned about that are going to enter the portal? Is there any way of predicting? I mean, Walker White, I hate that.
No.
We know his mother is battling, breast cancer and what he's been through. And we all know about him up here in Memphis, being from Little Rock. I hate losing a quality kid like that from a family like that.
There's just no way to predict it, I don't think, because you don't ever know who's tapping somebody's shoulder to tell them, hey, you need to go in, you need to go look somewhere else. And
yeah,
a lot of times it's not family, it's somebody else, it's an advisor or whatever. And yeah, so you don't know. That's the part you just don't know and can't factor exactly who you may lose depending on who you bring in. It might rub somebody the wrong way, but honestly, that's the unfortunate part of this too, is that it gives and it takes away. But you got to go get what you feel like you need to get to be successful, because everybody else is going to do it. And if you don't, you're going to get left in the dust. And so it's the unfortunate part of it. And it's why you still look, and there's still some amazing stories. And Ashton Jeanty at Boise State's about, in this day and age, is about as amazing a story as you can get. A guy that could have signed anywhere in the country after last season and said, nope, Boise State was with me, I'm sticking with them. And he's a guy that finished second Heisman Trophy voting and has his team in the playoffs. I think there's something to be learned from that, but it's still going to be a very rare story, I believe.
Yeah, I agree with you. Jason, let them know how they can follow you, keep up with you. And I know you'll be writing about the arrangements for Chet Williams, but one of the most loved men in Auburn history. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yeah, you can check us out at auburnundercover.com, part of 24/7 Network. And appreciate you checking us out. Follow me on Twitter at ITATJason, and lots of portal stuff coming up, basketball, kind of just looking to see what's next around the corner, because you don't really know. But there'll be a lot of portal things here for the next couple of weeks as you head towards Christmas.
Yeah. Well, Jason, Merry Christmas. We'll see you next week. It's going to be a busy week. All right, let me say something real quick. We're going to bring in Ken Capps, broadcasting remote across the street in the 7-Eleven parking lot. He had to pull over to the side of the road. Better you do that than try and get on a laptop while you're mobile. But I want to say something about one of our sponsors, Winter Timber Outdoors in Athens, Alabama. Great folks to work with. They're going to grow in the footprint that is the Southeastern Conference. Stores in Athens, Alabama, just broke ground on a new store in Auburn. They're looking to get into Athens, Georgia, Fayetteville, different places around the Southeastern Conference. Click on that QR code. Take a picture with your camera. Rete Masimara GPS BOGO, buy one, get one. All the shooting sports, they got you covered. Over 2,000 shotguns, rifles, and handguns in the store. All the gear, clothing, deer stands, everything. One of the best trained staffs anywhere. Winter Timber Outdoors in Athens, Alabama. And also, you're in the market for a new car or truck or SUV. Get out to LandersFordMemphis.com, the #1 Ford dealership in the Mid-South. Proud to be associated with them and have them as a sponsor. Brad Bellamy, the general manager, walk you through the process. They're open Monday through Saturday, 7 a.m., 7 p.m. Service department opens at 7. Sales department opens at 8. But I bet you if you got there at 7:15, 7:30, wanted to get you a new truck or a Bronco, they'll take care of you, because they're committed to making the customer experience the best possible, okay? Let them know you heard about them on Sidelines, $500 off. There's all kinds of opportunities. I say deals, but they're opportunities. Look at them on the screen right now. Bottom line, they're invested all over the Mid-South, and they will deliver vehicles anywhere, wherever you are. Landers Ford, #1 Ford dealership in the Mid-South. If you didn't buy your last vehicle from Landers, you probably paid too much. All right. Ken Capps, 7-Eleven. Give me a Slurpee while you're there, man. We don't have 7-Elevens in Memphis anymore, Coach. Remember, I used to get those.
Great coffee. They have great coffee.
There you go. I used to go get those trading cups. I still remember all the players, Rod Carew, Vida Blue, Carl Yastrzemski.
Sure.
It was great. Coach Ellis Johnson's on with us right now. And Coach has already said, I want to hear that story from Ken because he's going to add a little color to it about Quinn Ewers and Cade Klubnik in the battle at Darrell K. Royale Stadium.
Oh, guys, let me tell you, and I tell you, I've made really good friends with both the early morning manager and the afternoon manager here at the 7-Eleven too. So they're cool with me sitting out in their parking lot, for about 45 minutes, drinking coffee, and I told them what I was doing, and they thought it was really cool. So, but yeah, it's right across the street from my girls' high school. So if I don't have time to get back to Caps World Media headquarters, this is second best to your mobile media headquarters.
There you go.
But anyway, yeah, I'll try to get, 7-Eleven is based here in Dallas. Maybe I'll try to get them as a corporate sponsor too. You never know. You never know.
Yes, sir.
But guys, I have got, and I know Coach is going to love this story too, because it's about Texas high school football. And this week, every state championship game from 6-man to 6A is going to be played out at AT&T Stadium, aka Jerry World, and you're going to have 2 or 3 games a day, all televised. Probably when it's all said and done, about 200,000 fans will be at these games for the week, and it's just a carnival of high school football that everybody just looks forward to this time of year. And of course, I'm looking forward to being out there on Wednesday when all of my Texas 6-man teams play. But around that calendar, let me tell you something that is, I think, going to be very interesting and it could be very telling about this game on Saturday between Texas and Clemson. In 2021, Cade Klubnik and Quinn Ewers met in the state high school championship game, 6A, the highest classification. Cade played for Austin Westlake, which is coached by Todd Dodge, legendary Texas high school football coach, good friend of mine. He was at UT, he played quarterback at UT around the time I was there, known him forever. On the other side of the ball, coaching South Lake Carroll, the Dragons, was Riley Dodge, his son. His son Riley played safety at Texas. Okay, so you've got Quinn playing for South Lake. You've got Cade playing for Westlake. Okay, it's a battle of the lakes. Cade and Westlake ended up winning that game. Make sure I get the score right. 52-34. Now, Ewers had better stats. He passed for 351 yards, but he also had, does this sound familiar? 3 TDs as well. But he also had 2 interceptions in that game, plus he lost a fumble. On the other side of the ball, Cade, with the Westlake Chaparrals, passed for 200 yards and a touchdown, but also ran for almost 100 yards. And after the game, oh, by the way, they were both juniors too. Very important. They weren't even seniors yet. They were juniors.
Damn.
Okay, they'd already committed. Anyway, my point is that after the game, Riley Dodge, the coach of Southlake, said about Klubnik, it's kind of hard when you've got the guy, the fastest guy on the field with the ball 100% of the time. And he was referring to, of course, Cade Klubnik, who was with Westlake. And one of the things Texas is going to have to look out for this weekend is Cade can take off with the ball. And, he had kind of a rough year last year, his first year at Clemson. But this year, he's had a really, really terrific year. So to have these two, Westlake is a suburb for a lot of these guys that listen to the show are from Texas, they know. But Westlake is a suburb of Austin. That is where Drew Brees played. A number of different big players played over the years. Southlake is right here in the Metroplex between Dallas and Fort Worth. But both of these schools are blue bloods in high school football. And to get Quinn versus Cade one more time down at DKR. Man, this is a Texas high school Cinderella story.
It really is. Coach, you had a little something to add to this, and two legendary programs and two damn good quarterbacks. This is going to be a great night.
Y'all, I got cut off again, so if I repeat something y'all said, I apologize. But
no problem.
One of the things Dabo was talking about the other night is that the only time he's ever been to DKR was to watch Cade, and he sat with Sark and watched that game.
How about that?
And I'll tell
Wow.
you, and another one, the other day I was watching practice, and the Klubniks were there, and we were chatting a little bit, and I was asking him a little bit more about Cade's background. I didn't really know all where he was from and which high school and so forth. And I said, well, how did he end up over here? We're glad he did, but how did he end up over here? And they started saying, well, he almost went to Texas A&M, and I Texas A&M, and they said, yes, we're both grads of Texas A&M.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Not only you got a little more juice on this thing, I'm sure the Klubniks want to win this game really bad.
God.
Oh yeah, and they still live in Austin, right there in the Westlake area, and both of these guys are just Quinn and Cade, just upstanding gentlemen, fine young men, well spoken. I love listening to both of them talk. And let me give you one more piece of interesting information on this, related directly to the SEC this year. Michael Taft, number 16 for Texas, coach. He was also on that Westlake State championship team. He was named the defensive MVP of the Westlake Southlake game because he picked off Ewers twice. Okay. Now, Taft was a walk-on at Texas. He got a scholarship this past year, and he's become one of the best players. Look up all of his stats. He's become one of the best guys in the secondary in the SEC. So it's just so many great stories. And I know how we love traditions on this show and how we love high school football. And I was just itching to tell you guys this story today.
Well, it's a cool one. Ken, do you have any thoughts? I like Blind Squirrel Sports. Do you have any thoughts on the Battle of the Panthers? Duncanville versus North Crowley or Crowley. How do y'all pronounce it out in Texas? Crowley. Like Crowley's Ridge, Arkansas.
Well, Crowley came back and beat Duncanville. So that again, Duncanville is another powerhouse. So for them to lose in the semifinals, and for North Crowley, which is in Fort Worth, to make it to the finals, I mean, that's just another huge story for them. And of course, in 6-man, I got to throw in a pitch for my Gordon Longhorns. My Gordon Longhorns won the state championship. There's two divisions in 6A. As if 6-man couldn't get any smaller, there's a big 6-man division, and then there's a smaller 6-man division. Okay. And they're going to play both their championship games on Wednesday. The Gordon Longhorns, coached by my good friend Mike Reed, are going for their second straight state championship. And, one day we're going to have this discussion about 6-man rules here in Texas. But, there's a rule in 6-man in Texas. It's called the 45-point mercy rule. And Coach, you may be familiar with this as well, where if in 6-man, if you go up by 45 on an opponent, they call the game. So, if that's in the third quarter, they do play. If you go up 45 in the second quarter, they do play out the half. But anytime in the second half, you go up by 45, game over. Gordon has 45 all of their opponents this year, every single one of them. They haven't played a whole game the entire year. They're so damn good. So it's going to be really fun to go out and see them too. The Gordon Longhorns.
I love it. Coach, have you ever scouted a six-man football game before?
Never in person, but I've had to study film on it. And one of the things that jumps out at you immediately is speed on a 6-man team is really more exaggerated than it is on a football field with 11 guys on each side. Sometimes you can somehow negate the speed of a great player on the other side, maybe double him and put a player over the top of him in the pass game or whatever. But our public schools don't have any 6-man, but a lot of our private schools over here do. And my little hometown private school has had to go to 6-man. And I tell you, man, I never heard of that rule, but it makes sense. it is very easy when there's a little disparity between the two teams. It'll get out of whack real quick. It's not
That's
like
right.
a regular football game because the space on the field and the great athlete out there with nobody else to match up on him, it's impossible. It'd be like trying to play Kobe Bryant one-on-one on an NBA court.
Right. And I got to tell you guys one other quick story about six man,
Yeah.
and then because you'll love this. Okay, so they play 8-man football in Nebraska, but they play a lot of 6-man football too up in Montana and places like that. Where there's not that many people, and so. But anyway, the Texas 6-man coaches started this a few years ago. They round up the best 6-man players in the state. They get on a bus. You ready for this? They get on a bus and drive to Canada to go play the Canadian 6-man team over the 4th of July. And I've never been on this trip. I've got to go because the Texas coaches talk about how on the 4th of July in Canada, the Canadian fans and friends of 6-man put on the dog for the American 4th of July while they're up there in Canada. But they tell everybody to meet in Amarillo. They can't send a bus to every little town in Texas. So they tell the kids, okay, meet us at noon in Amarillo next Thursday. And so they pick up everybody in Amarillo and drive the hell to Canada. Can you believe that? To play 6-man.
These stories, and Coach, I'll get these calls from Ken on a Friday night, and he's like, you've seen the TV show Landman with Billy Bob Thornton, Coach. I don't know if you've seen it yet, but it's my favorite new show. I've had enough of Beth Dutton and her. She has to have a drink every time she's pissed off, or a cigarette, or both. And I like Rip, but man, Landman, something about West Texas is so cool. It's where the Cowboys still live, in Montana and all, but that's a cool story. Guys, we're going to go a few more minutes here. I want to ask you, and I'll start with you, Coach, what Ken's talking about with Texas, Clemson, and then you start looking at the state of Texas when you're recruiting a state that big with 30 million people plus, and it takes a month of Sundays to get to a state championship. How do you compare Texas to Georgia to Florida? Those are the 3 biggest states in the SEC footprint in terms of players.
Yeah, that's a difficult comparison. They're all loaded with great athletes, great players, great programs. I will say this about Texas, though. Their programs in the other states, Georgia, Florida, everything, they're well funded and they've got facilities and such. But when you go to some of these Texas schools, it's a different stratosphere. One of the things I regretted, I coached over 40 years in college. I hardly ever had a Texas area. Now, I went in recruiting specific position guys as a coordinator or something.
Yeah.
So I did get a chance to go over there. But every time I'd go over there recruiting, I'd be like, damn, why can't I have a Texas area? These guys, I'm looking all over the woods in South Carolina trying to find somebody that could beat Alabama. And I could go down to Texas and I'd have to fight like hell, but I could find 12 in one day that might could beat Alabama. So, but it's just unique. And the facilities and the structure, it's the whole deal. These big schools are run like colleges. You go in and tell them you'd like to speak to the coach. He's not teaching history. He's down there in the weight room or in the office watching film and so forth. If he's on campus, you might have to go down to the local Waffle House and find him.
That's right. Well, what's cool, Coach, and Ken, I was driving in for media days back in July. I've been to Dallas a number of times. When you cross that big lake on the Interstate 30 coming into town, is
Lake Ray Hubbard. Lake Ray Hubbard.
It looks like Rob had another one of his his freeze ups there. So we'll see if he comes back. Ken, what did you say there? You jumped in. What were you saying?
Oh, I was just saying that the lake he's referring to, this gigantic lake, is Lake Ray Hubbard, which is this giant lake on the east side of Dallas. That when you're coming in from Arkansas, you cross over, and it's pretty big. Somebody made a very good point too. I got to correct myself. Uh, Gordon did not 45 Abbott in the playoffs. Gordon 45'd every one of their regular season opponents. So I want to be clear about that. But yeah, the Abbott Panthers, which is where Willie Nelson played football back in the day, halfway between Dallas and Austin. The Abbott Panthers, very strong program, coached by my very good friend and loyal Texas Aggie, Terry Crawford. He just retired last year, a legend in six-man coaching. So yeah, it's just, and the personalities of six-man too. They're so interesting. Coach, people always ask me, well, who's the most famous Texas six-man high school player? And I'm sure you'll know the guy that will always be remembered. Now, people always say Willie Nelson. No, Willie Nelson, when Willie played at Abbott, Abbott was 11-man. The most famous six-man player in Texas history is Jack Pardee. Jack Pardee played Texas six-man football and went on to greatness. So it's a lot of fun stuff there in Texas six-man.
Well, we have had a full Texas six-man tutorial, which is good. It's something that I'd be fascinated about because you don't get it in every state, but it's very important. Lots of talent come out of that. Guys, we're going to wrap it up for the Monday and say thank you for joining us. Ken Capps, you'll be with us this week right later in the week. As always, you're a very popular guest on our show. We say thank you, sir, and wish you adieu. Well, we'll talk to you here in the next couple of weeks. Coach Ellis Johnson, thanks always, Coach. You're a pleasure every Monday to have on. Please take care. We will hopefully talk to you again this coming up Monday, but a little more pregame. So thanks, Coach.
Thank you. Enjoy.
And Rob will be back with us tomorrow. We are endeavoring to get all these things worked out, but we're close. We are close, folks. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us. We always say take care of yourself and others this holiday season. Please look out for all of those that look out for those who can't. This is that season, and we're all about that here on SEC Sideline Sports. Thanks to all of our sponsors. Please check out SEC sidelines.live. You can see all of our sponsors there, but you can always check them out here on our QR codes. If you missed a QR code, just go over into the chat room. If you're on YouTube or whatever, you can catch it there, or rewind the show. You got a QR, take your picture of the QR code, takes you right to the website. But thank you to all of our sponsors and to everybody that have stayed with us now. We're almost a year into this entire process, and man, it's been exciting, and we're excited for this following year. So thanks to the guests and everybody that are involved in the show. We will see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern. And the Buddy Martin Show will be on tonight at 9 p.m. Eastern with all of his cast of characters, Shane Matthews, Buddy Martin, and all of that stuff to bring you all the latest in Florida Gator news, notes, and all of that good stuff with the Gasparilla Bowl right around the corner. All right. I probably hacked that up pretty well. Who am I? Doesn't matter. I'm Brendan Martin. Thanks to our sponsors. Hey, thanks to Hewlett & Dunn. Love these guys. This is where I see all these awesome hats I'm wearing all the time. They send them to me. I know. I'm the luckiest guy in the world. All right. Check them out, hewlettandunn.com. Check out all of our sponsors. And have a lovely day. Take care of yourself and take care of those around you. Merry Christmas, everybody.
In a perfect world, you'd set a health goal and results would happen overnight. In this world, the real world, it takes time, dedication, and the right support to achieve your best self. The Vitamin Shoppe health enthusiasts are here to make sure you're not wasting a single moment on the wrong supplements. From the highest quality sports nutrition and superfoods to the most sought after trends, you'll find a huge variety of science-backed solutions for every goal, and the people to help guide you along the path to greatness.
Unbelievably, every 2 minutes in our communities, a child is either bought or sold for sex. I am R.A. Dickey, board member for the Nashville Anti-Human Trafficking Coalition. Join me and millions of others in our fight against human trafficking and for its victims by helping to educate the most vulnerable among us, our middle and high school students. Go to nhtcoalition.org, become a partner, and help keep our families safe, because none of God's children are for sale.